Getting a book focused on a single character published is a challenge. Getting one with 3 or more POVs on shelves is a miracle, especially as a debut author. So what can you do when your passion has led you to commit all these publishing sins? In this video, I'll break down ways to streamline a query letter for a book with a large cast, show you how I completely rewrote my own, and provide insight on how to put your best foot forward in an unforgiving industry. So how do I feel as I'm trying to get a multi-POV, very long debut novel published? Reflective. Realistically, I have to recognize that the qualities I mentioned are going to make it harder for my book to be published. Currently, the querying process to find an agent hasn't been going tremendously well. I mentioned last video, 2 Lauras have already turned me down with form letters, and I completed the hat trick, unfortunately. I also received 1 more form letter rejection and 1 by omission. The agent said that they would respond within 2 weeks. So that means out of the 11 initial query submissions, 5 have said no. That doesn't feel great, especially since I haven't received any feedback on what I can do to improve my chances. But on the bright side, none of the agents that I found that were interested in D&D have passed. So I think this is an opportunity to slow down, circle the wagons, and figure out how to proceed. This whole experience is an opportunity to learn. I can't become bitter and frustrated. So let's reframe and not see agents as barriers or gatekeepers. They're an important part of the team. Ironically, my family crest is of a literal gatekeeper. So maybe I'm paying for the sins of my ancestors. What have I learned from submitting so far? You need to be really organized. It's hard to keep track of everything. Also, autocorrect is not your friend. It will mangle the agent's name in submissions. In the spirit of reflecting, I think my query letter is something I can work on, a potential weak point. We'll get into that later. Why is a multi-POV book, one with many perspectives, so much harder to pitch? Many books, movies, and TV shows have a lot of characters in them, so why would this be an issue with agents? I think the simplest answer is that it's hard to do right. You'd need to gain their trust before they might take this risk. Lisa Daly has a great video, which I'll link below, that gets into some of these concerns. The first she mentions is that all the characters might sound the same. So how did I try to avoid that? I used composites of people I know in real life, then added in a specific interest or experience that I was familiar with. That allowed me to inject key details, make them more believable. The second concern Lisa brings up is that characters know things that they shouldn't. They can read the minds of other characters. D&D and tabletop role-playing actually prepared me for this. There's a term called metagaming, where players are discouraged from using outside information to inform their characters' choices. Her third concern is plotting is difficult. I'm not going to deny that. For me, time was a huge boon to solve this issue. It allowed me to puzzle out solutions to any snags in the story and avoid relying on convenient plot devices. Number 4 for Lisa was, readers hate jumping from character to character. Obviously this is subjective, but anyone who has read a multi-POV book has had a character they despise. My approach to avoid this was to emphasize the strengths and weaknesses of each character, to show why they benefit from coming together as a team. And Lisa's 5th reason, too many characters make it harder to connect with anyone in particular. My answer to the prior point largely applies here as well. Also, I was careful not to overwhelm the reader with too many names and reined in the world building. Including a dramatis personae can also help. Now that we know the concerns agents might have, how do we pitch a multi-POV book to them? A query letter is generally their first impression of you, so that becomes critical. The common wisdom is that no matter how many characters are in your book, your query letter should focus on 1. The Reddit sub, Pub Tips, won't even allow you to post a query for review if it doesn't highlight a main character. But what if you don't have one? At that point, it's best to focus on 1 or 2 characters from your story. Here are some examples, 2 of which are from that wonderful resource, Query Shark. This author opens their query by mentioning a primary character to hook your attention. Emily finds herself in a locked room. The following paragraph adds some character and tone, but here's where the query shines. The abduction of Emily is an account of kidnapping as seen from 3 points of view: her kidnapper, the kidnapped, and the people left behind. And you can see that Janet was just thrilled by this choice. Here's a query that really swings for the fences. The first paragraph focuses on a single character, Abby, but also captures the tone and voice of the book. Breaking some traditional rules, the next paragraph is linked by "We cross the universe." I think that's a fun and creative way to stand out, especially in a slush pile. Another primary character is introduced in this paragraph, and then things get really wacky. We travel onward and are introduced to 6 more characters, all in a list. Janet's reaction says it all. Sometimes breaking the rules can work to your benefit. The challenge is in determining when you should let loose or when you should play it safe. In my case, since I have also written a long multi-POV book, I don't know if I should play it safe. I think taking some risks makes sense. It'll help it stand out. Janet addressed that directly here, and since my book is almost identical in word count, this really boosted my confidence. And here's the last multi-POV query I'd like to share. This one sold for 6 figures. Shelby doesn't avoid mentioning her 3 characters, she jumps right into it. Remarkably Bright Creatures is told alternately from the perspective of an elderly widow, a fatherless young man, and a giant Pacific octopus. The following paragraphs highlight the octopus, then the widow, and finally the fatherless young man, and ties them all together. Angie's review of the query highlights why this structure was effective. We get a brief mention of the 3 POV characters, which include an octopus, talk about a hook. Shelby's 3-paragraph pitch is structured in a way that mirrors how the book is structured. Redundant. Each paragraph introduces one of the major characters. In truth, this is an approach I often warn querying writers not to use because more often than not, we see it done poorly. Once again, it's okay to break some of the rules, but you have to do so very intentionally. I found this advice also insightful. What not to do. Sally is this type of person, Jane is this type of person, Barbara is this type of person. Over the course of the novel, these 3 women will confront adversity, face hardship, find love, and discover the true meaning of friendship. Or in the case of YA Lit, here's another common iteration. Billy's a nerd who is constantly bullied, Sam is the quarterback of the football team, Jamie is a fairy from the magical land of Egg Waffle. Together, this unlikely trio will have the adventure of a lifetime. This formula is one we most often see in query letters for multi-POV novels. The problem is, there's no room in this formula for a burning story question. A burning story question is the thing that lets you know you actually have a story, as opposed to just characters doing stuff. So how did I take these lessons and apply them to my own query letter? My new query letter is on the left, the old one is on the right if you'd like to see it as a reference. I started by focusing on one character, the titular witch of my story. Lady Galder is a woods witch, nigh immortal and exhausted by the childish antics of self-appointed rulers. When heavily armed interlopers, led by the ruthless Lord Osmond, dare to trespass in her forest and harvest the trees from its groves, she has had enough. She would rather risk her ancient soul by making a pact with demons than witness the destruction of the natural world. Unfortunately, she knows that her sacrifice will not be nearly enough. Portents have foretold that the land of Galelan can only heal once 4 individuals unite the factions tearing the world apart, restoring balance by making allies out of bitter enemies. Here's why I tried to tie in the unique structure of my novel. Liam is smugly satisfied that he could imagine such an intricate fantasy world and is eager to immerse 3 of his friends and his increasingly estranged girlfriend into the setting by running a campaign of Dungeons & Dragons. His video game addiction, dependency on weed, and crumbling relationship aren't nearly as important as the escapism tabletop role-playing provides. He and the players in his game face stakes, both real and imagined, that force them to confront how small decisions can lead to drastic consequences. An epic tale that questions whether navigating Hollywood and daring to date in your 30s are less harrowing than dungeon crawls, subterranean Tengu, or indigenous warriors with magical tattoos. Hopefully these don't count as some of the lists that Angie mentioned in her review of Remarkably Bright Creatures. I may have to come back and re-edit this. That's okay, it's part of the process, and it makes me glad that I didn't submit to every agent on my list. The Witch's Weave, a debut fantasy novel of 175,000 words, is a journey through our world and the escape into imagination that many of us abandoned in childhood. It is told through the points of view of the players, the outlandish characters they roleplay as, and the troubled man who has brought them all together. I work as a freelance sound designer in film, art, and various media, telling stories through audio. Thank you for your time and consideration. So what do you think? Is that an improvement that hooks your attention and gives me a better chance? One aspect I haven't added to my new query are comps. I'm going to take some time next video to get into why comps are so important, how I found some more relevant ones, and demonstrate how to submit to agents. And here's something about me. I love gummy bears. As a preteen and teenager, I'd often eat a pound every weekend, sometimes in a single day. Shout out to the fluoride in New York City's tap water for preventing cavities. My current favorite type of gummy bears are from the bulk section of Sprouts. I believe they are the Albany's 12 flavor kind, which are available online. Sponsorship opportunity?